no nanny lasted an hour with the millionaire's triplets until a black maid did the impossible. When Maria walked into that mansion for the first time, she had no idea she was about to break a record that had stumped over 40 professional nannies. The billionaire's triplets had made grown women cry, seasoned caregivers quit on the spot, and one nanny literally jumped out a window to escape. But Maria, she lasted more than an hour. She lasted 6 months. And by the end, she didn't just tame 3 impossible children, she transformed an entire family forever. This is the story of how one woman's unconventional approach to childcare shattered stereotypes and proved that sometimes the most unlikely heroes come from the most unexpected places. Before I move deeper into this story, I want you to tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country or city in the comments, and if you're new here, please like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Richard Blackstone was worth $2.8 billion. He owned tech companies, real estate empires, and had his face on magazine covers. But there was one thing his money couldn't buy: peace in his own home. His 7-year-old triplets, Emma, Ethan, and Ellie, were legendary for all the wrong reasons. After their mother passed away 3 years earlier, they had become what the nanny agencies whispered about in hushed tones: the impossible case. The children had developed what child psychologists call reactive behaviors. They would hide nanny's belongings, set elaborate traps, refuse to eat, scream for hours, and had once collectively decided to paint the living room walls with chocolate pudding. One nanny lasted 12 minutes. Another made it to 37 minutes before she called her agency in tears, begging to be removed from the assignment. The agencies had run out of candidates. Richard was desperate. His work was suffering, the children were clearly struggling, and he felt like he was failing as a father. Board meetings were interrupted by emergency calls from nannies threatening to quit. Important business deals fell through because Richard couldn't focus, knowing chaos was waiting for him at home. His assistant Sarah had watched this brilliant businessman crumble under the weight of single parenthood and impossible childcare situations. That's when Sarah made a suggestion that changed everything. Instead of going through the usual channels, why not try a different approach entirely? What if they looked beyond the traditional nanny agencies and found someone with real-world experience, someone who understood struggle and resilience? Maria Johnson was 28 years old and had never worked as a professional nanny. She was a former elementary school teacher who had left education to care for her sick grandmother. Those 3 years caring for her grandmother had taught her patience in ways no classroom ever could. She had learned to read between the lines of difficult behavior, to see pain hiding behind anger, and to remain calm in the face of seemingly impossible situations. When her grandmother passed away, Maria found herself grieving, financially struggling, and looking for work, any work to pay her bills. Her teaching credentials had expired, and she couldn't afford to renew them immediately. She was scrolling through job listings late one night when she saw Richard's posting online. It was brutally honest about the challenges, offered good pay, and Maria desperately needed the money. What Maria didn't know was that she was candidate number 43, and that the previous 42 had all been highly credentialed professionals with glowing references. On that first morning, Maria arrived at the Blackstone mansion wearing jeans, sneakers, and carrying a worn backpack that had seen her through college and her grandmother's long illness. The butler who answered the door looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. This woman didn't look like the parade of professionally dressed nannies who had come before her. Richard himself seemed surprised when Maria introduced herself, his eyes quickly taking in her casual appearance and wondering if Sarah had made a mistake in recommending this unconventional approach. The previous nannies had arrived in professional attire, carrying leather portfolios filled with credentials, references, and structured activity plans. Maria arrived with something completely different: authenticity, hard-earned wisdom, and a small photo of her grandmother that she carried everywhere for strength. When Richard introduced Maria to the triplets, they immediately began their usual routine. Emma announced that they didn't want another nanny and that she should leave now. Ethan started throwing blocks across the room. Ellie began screaming at the top of her lungs, their tried and tested method of making adults uncomfortable. But Maria didn't react the way the others had. She didn't try to stop them, didn't raise her voice, and didn't look panicked. Instead, she sat down on the floor, pulled out her phone, and started playing music. It wasn't children's music. It was old-school R&B, the kind her grandmother used to play while cooking Sunday dinner, music that carried memories of love, loss, and resilience. The triplets stopped what they were doing. This was completely unexpected. Maria started nodding her head to the beat, her shoulders swaying slightly, completely unbothered by their chaos. She seemed genuinely relaxed, as if sitting on the floor of a mansion listening to music while children threw blocks was exactly where she wanted to be. After a few minutes, she looked up at them and said something that no nanny had ever said before. "You know what? You three are really good at being angry. Like, professionally good. I'm actually impressed." The children didn't know how to respond to that. They were used to adults trying to make them happy, trying to calm them down, trying to fix them. Maria was the first person to acknowledge their feelings without trying to change them immediately. "I get it," she continued. "You've had a lot of people come through here trying to replace your mom. That's got to be really hard. If I were you, I'd probably be angry too."
This wasn't the typical response. Previous nannies that either avoided talking about loss entirely or spoken platitudes about better places and looking down from heaven. Maria spoke about death and grief like they were real, valid experiences that didn't need to be sugar-coated or fixed. Over the next hour, something unprecedented happened. The children didn't break anything. They didn't scream. They didn't try to make Maria leave. Instead, they found themselves actually talking to her. Maria had a gift that no professional training could teach. She saw children as complete human beings with valid emotions, not problems to be solved. When Ethan mentioned that he missed building things with his mom, Maria didn't try to distract him from the sadness. Instead, she asked Ethan to tell her about what they used to build together. When Ellie said she hated all the nannies because they tried to make her eat vegetables, Maria didn't lecture her about nutrition. She asked her what her favorite foods were and why. When Emma declared that she was never going to like any nanny ever, Maria nodded and said that was totally her choice, and she wasn't going to try to make her like her. By the end of that first day, Richard couldn't believe what he was witnessing. The children were calm, engaged, and for the first time in months, they seemed like kids instead of tiny terrorists. When he peeked into the living room around 4 o'clock, he found all 3 children sitting with Maria, helping her organize a box of old photos she had brought. Pictures of her grandmother, her family, her students from when she taught. The children were asking questions about the people in the photos, sharing stories about their own family pictures, and for the first time since their mother's death, the house felt peaceful. But Maria's real breakthrough came in week 2, and it would test everything she believed about patience and unconditional care. The triplets had been testing her in smaller ways, hiding her keys, putting salt in her coffee, rearranging her things. Maria took it all in stride, often turning their pranks into games or laughing along with them. But then they pulled out what they considered their nuclear option. They told Maria they hated her and wanted her to leave, just like all the others. Previous nannies had either taken this personally and gotten upset or tried to convince the children that they didn't really mean it. Maria did neither. "Okay," she said simply. "You can hate me if you want to. That's allowed. But I'm still going to be here, and I'm still going to care about you, even if you hate me." This response completely disarmed them. They were used to their emotions having power over adults, making them angry, sad, or desperate to win their approval. Maria was the first adult who didn't try to control their feelings or let their feelings control her. Over the following weeks, Maria established routines that were unlike anything the previous nannies had tried. Instead of structured activities designed to keep the children busy, she focused on what she called real-life stuff. She taught them to cook simple meals, explaining that everyone needs to know how to take care of themselves. When Ellie struggled to crack eggs, Maria didn't do it for her. She showed her the technique and let her practice until she got it right, celebrating each small success. She showed them how to do basic home repairs after Ethan broke a cabinet handle, turning what could have been a moment of shame into a learning opportunity about fixing mistakes rather than hiding them. She took them grocery shopping and let them help plan meals, giving them agency in their own lives. Other shoppers would sometimes stare at this young black woman with 3 wealthy white children who clearly adored her, but Maria taught the children to navigate those moments with dignity and confidence. Most importantly, she talked to them about their mother honestly, without the artificial cheer that had made previous conversations feel fake and dismissive of their pain. Previous nannies had either avoided the topic entirely or spoken about her in overly cheerful ways that felt fake to the children. Maria asked them to tell her about her, listened to their stories, and acknowledged how much they missed her. "Your mom sounds like she was an amazing person. I bet she would be really proud of how much you 3 love each other." The transformation wasn't instant, but it was steady. The children began to trust Maria because she had proven that she wouldn't leave when things got difficult, wouldn't try to replace their mother, and wouldn't treat their grief as something to be fixed. By month 3, something beautiful was happening. The triplets were still spirited and strong-willed. Maria never tried to change their personalities, but they had learned to express their emotions in healthier ways. They started talking about their feelings instead of just acting them out. Emma, who had been the most resistant, began asking Maria about her own life. She learned that Maria had grown up helping her single mother raise her younger siblings and had experience caring for family members. She started to see her not as another temporary adult trying to manage them, but as someone who understood what it felt like to carry responsibility. Ethan discovered that Maria had played high school volleyball and begged her to teach him sports. Their afternoon activities became a time when Ethan felt comfortable talking about missing his dad's attention and feeling overlooked since his mom died. Ellie, the youngest, had been having nightmares and refusing to sleep alone. Maria didn't try to force her to be brave or tell her that there was nothing to be afraid of. Instead, she taught her breathing techniques she had learned when her grandmother was sick and scared. She sat with her until she felt safe, night after night, until gradually she didn't need her to. But the real test came in month 4, when Richard had to travel internationally for 2 weeks. Previous nannies had dreaded being alone with the children for extended periods, but Maria approached it differently. She sat down with the triplets and explained that their dad would be gone for business and it would just be the 4 of them. Then she asked them what they wanted to do during that time. The children were shocked. No adult had ever asked their opinion about something so important. Together, they planned activities, meals, and even designated special time for missing their dad and mom. Maria made it clear that feeling sad about their dad being away was normal and okay, just like missing their mom was normal and okay.
During those 2 weeks, something remarkable happened. The children didn't see Maria as the hired help trying to control them while their father was away. They saw her as their ally, someone who was taking care of them because she genuinely cared about their well-being. When Richard returned, he found his children happier and more settled than they had been since their mother's death. They ran to hug him, told him about their adventures with Maria, and for the first time in years, the house felt like a home instead of a battlefield. But Maria's impact went beyond just managing the children's behavior. She had helped them process their grief in a healthy way, taught them life skills, and most importantly, shown them that they were worthy of consistent, unconditional care. Richard began to see his own children differently. Maria had modeled a way of parenting that was firm but compassionate, structured but flexible, and always focused on the children's emotional needs as well as their practical ones. The story of Maria and the Blackstone triplets began to spread through the wealthy circles of the city. Other families with challenging childcare situations began reaching out, wanting to know how Maria had accomplished what 42 other professionals couldn't. But Maria wasn't interested in becoming a celebrity nanny. Her success with the triplets wasn't about special techniques or professional training. It was about treating children as whole human beings, deserving of respect, understanding, and genuine care. The breakthrough moment came in month 5, during a family dinner. Emma, who had been the most guarded of the three, suddenly looked at Maria and said, "I don't hate you anymore. I think I actually love you." Maria felt tears in her eyes as she responded, "I love you too, Emma. All 3 of you." For the first time since their mother's death, the triplets felt safe loving an adult who wasn't their father. They had learned that loving someone new didn't mean forgetting their mother or betraying her memory. Richard realized that Maria hadn't just solved his childcare problem, she had helped heal his family. As Maria's 6-month contract neared its end, Richard made an offer that surprised everyone. He asked Maria to stay permanently, not just as a nanny, but as a family coordinator and the children's advocate within their household. Maria accepted, but with conditions. She wanted to go back to school to study child psychology and family counseling. She wanted to eventually help other families going through similar struggles. Richard not only agreed, but offered to pay for Maria's education. Today, 3 years later, Maria has completed her master's degree in family therapy while continuing to work with the Blackstone family. The triplets are thriving 10-year-olds who still have their strong personalities but have learned healthy ways to express their emotions and cope with loss. Emma has become a confident leader who advocates for other kids at school. Ethan channels his energy into sports and building projects and has become the family mediator. Ellie, once the most anxious, now helps other children who are struggling with change or loss. Maria has started a nonprofit organization that trains caregivers to work with children who have experienced trauma, with funding from Richard and several other families whose lives she's touched. She speaks at conferences about the importance of treating children's emotional needs as seriously as their physical ones, and her approach has influenced childcare practices across the country. The organization, called Healing Hearts Childcare, provides training that goes beyond traditional nanny education. It teaches caregivers to recognize trauma responses, to validate children's emotions, and to see difficult behavior as communication rather than defiance. The 42 nannies who came before Maria weren't bad at their jobs. They were trained professionals who followed best practices and genuinely wanted to help. But they were trying to manage behavior without addressing the underlying emotional needs that were driving that behavior. Maria succeeded because she understood something that can't be taught in any training program, that children who are acting out are usually children who are hurting, and healing has to come before behavior modification. Her approach challenged every stereotype about who is qualified to care for children. She didn't have the right credentials, the right background, or the right training according to traditional standards. What she had was empathy, patience, and the wisdom to see children as complex human beings rather than problems to be solved. The story of Maria and the triplets reminds us that sometimes the most profound solutions come from the most unexpected sources. It challenges us to look beyond credentials and appearances to see the character and heart of a person. Maria's success wasn't about having the right degree or coming from the right background. It was about bringing her whole self, including her own experiences with loss and struggle, to her work with these children. Her story also highlights how grief and trauma affect children differently than adults, and how traditional approaches to childcare often fail when they don't account for the emotional complexity of a child's inner world. The triplets weren't bad kids. They were hurting kids who needed someone to see their pain and meet them where they were. Maria proved that effective childcare isn't about controlling children or making them compliant. It's about understanding them, respecting them, and helping them develop the emotional tools they need to navigate their world. It's about showing up consistently, even when things get difficult, and proving through actions that they are worthy of love and care. The Blackstone family's transformation shows us that healing is possible, that children are more resilient than we often give them credit for, and that the right person with the right heart can make all the difference in the world. If this story inspired you, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the globe. And if you want to hear more incredible stories about people who defied expectations and changed lives, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. These are the stories that remind us that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes the most profound changes happen when we least expect them.